Please join me, everyone, in a really warm virtual welcome for our good friend, Dr. Eran Magen. Hi, Eran.
Hooray. Thank you very much. Thank you for at least one other person virtually clapping. That was exciting. Gardner's iPhone. Thank you. Enjoy the cereal. Oh, even better. I apologize. Pancakes. Are you just eating the batter straight up, or are you preparing to make it? Preparing to. Okay, got it. Good. This will be a workshop then. Got it. I see. So like Charlene was saying, for those of you so inspired, please turn on your cameras. It's just nice to see each other. And a big part of this is just having a sense of community, right? Seeing other parents and other guardians and other people taking care of kids and just realizing we're all existing in the same world. It's just nice to have a feel, right? We're all dealing with something similar. And, you know, I'll say right from the get-go, before all the slides and everything, we're all here because we're trying to figure out how to do things better for our kids and with our kids, not have a better experience as parents. And the two go together, in my opinion. I don't think that it's either enjoy our time with our kids or serve them well and prepare them for life. I think very much not only that both can happen, but that it's better when they both happen simultaneously. Life kind of conspires against us. Things get very stressful at times in our own lives with our kids. And it pulls us to act quickly and sometimes without, as much thought as we'd like or not as kindly as we'd like. And I think there's very much a different way. We can be present with our kids. We can enjoy time with them. And the more we're able to establish a good, harmonious, pleasant, cooperative relationship with our kids, the easier everything gets. Every change we want to make with the routine with the kids, every interaction that we have with them just feels more pleasant this way for us and for them. And in the long run, what we have with our kids is our relationship with them, right? What I want is that as my son continues growing up, I want him to come to me when there's a problem that is big enough. I also want him to solve his own problems, right? Like he can tie his own shoes. But when there's a big problem that's scary for him, I want him to always feel comfortable coming to me. And that depends first and foremost on the strength of our relationship. And so I am constantly thinking about making the relationship stronger. And every time that I'm about to do something that might jeopardize the relationship, I think really hard, is this worth it? Right? Do I want to use my relationship points for this? And very often the answer is no. And I hold back, right? I'm okay being like 2 minutes late someplace or 5 minutes late someplace. That's me. Some people really dislike being late. That's legitimate as well. But like in terms of my own personal preferences, like I'm okay being a little late. I'm okay with, drawing a little bit outside the lines if it removes friction for us. Up to a point, of course, life does have actual boundaries that we need to respect sometimes. But I think that in prioritizing the relationship, I not only ensure that good things will happen, 10, 20 years down the line, but also right now, because when I make requests of him, he's so much more likely to cheerfully comply because we're just in the habit of agreeing with each other. He asks me for stuff and I say yes, and I ask him for stuff and he says yes. And it's such a nicer way to live. And that's the approach that I'm here to advocate for. Okay. Having said all this, let me move on to the specifics. Thank you, everybody, for all of your cameras. This is really lovely. All right. So some thoughts about how to be your child's favorite conversation partner. Later on when I'm done sharing this, I'll also put in the chat the email address for me if you want to follow up, the URL to get the slides. But for now, let's just talk. If you have questions in the meantime, by the way, like Charlene was saying, you can put them in the chat. I won't see them as I go. I'm a very poor multitasker, but I'll see them after. And Charlene and Bev are looking at them as we go. So if there's something urgent, they'll let me know. And otherwise, I'll address the questions when I'm done. So first thing I want to say, because this is the most important thing to say, congratulations for taking time to think about being parents. It's not trivial, right? There's a lot of life going on for all of us. I bet there are 4 other things that you could be doing right now that would look like they would help reduce stress, or at least like scratch the itch, whatever is going on. And so great. I'm glad you're here. I don't know that, my stuff is gonna, what I have to say is gonna change your world. I don't know, but you're taking time to think about being a parent, and that is amazing and not obvious. So congratulations, and good for you, and good for your kids. Also, I want to say that obviously everything that I say here may or may not work for you, right? You're very welcome to disagree. Take what works, drop what doesn't. I hope you'll experiment if some of the things here are at least intriguing for you. But I'm not pretending to know everything or to have the answer to everything. And then the last thing that I want to be really clear about not pretending is I don't do any of this perfect 100% of the time. I'm very happy if I do this perfectly once a week, right? So this is aspirational. These are habits that I'm trying to develop that I think are a good idea to develop for really everybody. But the goal is not perfection. The goal is a little better than before all the time. Okay, just to be clear, zero intimidation in this room. Okay. So talking with our kids. The context of talking with their kids in my mind now is when everybody's basically calm, right? So when I think about the total context of interactions, there's when people are generally calm, that's when we build relationships. When people are a little upset, like if our kid is kind of worked up or even very worked up, and that's when we do supportive interactions. And that's kind of a different set of principles than what I'm going to talk about today. And then there's very, very upset to the point of crisis, totally different set of rules. We prioritize safety very aggressively over the relationship even. But today we're happily on this far left side. We're talking about times when kind of life is as usual, which I realize for those of you with teenagers might mean closer to the middle of the bar than the left side. But life as usual essentially, and we're interacting at that point. So I'll give you the very bottom line, just for those of you that really only have 30 seconds of attention left in them. I'll start with the bottom line and then I'll go into the details. The bottom line is that in order for your kid to want to talk with you, you really need to want to know their world and let them lead the conversation. Like whatever they want to talk about, like be curious about it. That's essentially it. Now we'll talk about the how to demonstrate this to your kid, right? But the more you want to actually get to know your kid, not train or teach or change, or just get to know your kid and be curious about your kid's life and be humble, meaning allowing your kid to teach you about his or her life, right? Because you don't know, your kid knows. And not jumping in and correcting and changing and revising and interrogating, just wanting to get to know your kid. Like pretend you're on a date with your kid and you're trying to get to know your kid. You're not trying to impress your kid, trying to get to know your kid. It's that kind of a date, right? So the more you can have that mindset, the more your kid will want to talk with you. So leaving aside changing your kid and going into absorbing from your kid. The whole approach that I'm talking about here is founded on this notion of the relational bank account. And the idea is that the more goodwill we have in the relationship, the more good things happen in the relationship. And the main goal that I as a parent have is to increase the amount of goodwill in the relationship between me and the kid. So more goodwill means my kid trusts me more, is more honest with me and vulnerable, because my kid is not worried that I'll do something painful with that information that I get from my kid. My kid will put more effort into work that we do together or requests that I make, will cooperate more, will forgive me when I screw up, right? So many good things happen when there's more goodwill. And in order to have more goodwill, basically to make deposits of goodwill into a relationship, I want to show my kid that I care about my kid and that I respect my kid. And in order to have less goodwill in the relationship, which is not the goal, I can either show my kid that I don't care about him or don't respect him. I'm going to say him because I have a boy, but translate into your own circumstances. And the other thing that removes goodwill from a relationship or makes a withdrawal is when we ask the other person to inconvenience himself on our behalf, right? Could you pass the salt? Could you do the laundry? Could you, help me with this thing? And these are all legitimate things in the course of a normal relationship. Of course, we ask other people to inconvenience themselves on our behalf. It's okay. But the idea here is just to be mindful to not make so many requests without making deposits that follow. You can make sort of a quick dipstick test about where you are in your relationship with your kid or with anyone really, by thinking about how the other person relates to you. So in the fantasy version, right, your kid goes out of his or her way to be helpful to you and to make life good for you, right? This is when you wake up with your kid massaging your feet, having made you pancakes and brought them to bed, right? Maximum relational account balance. Congratulations, unmute yourselves and I will mute and I want to learn. For most of us on good days, our kid will kind of cheerfully cooperate with us, right? We say, hey, can you blah, 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 sure. In 5 minutes, we need to turn off the thing and then go do that. Okay. And then it actually happens. There's not a lot of nudging that needs to happen. That's a pretty good place to be. If you're kind of, liminal, if it's getting to be nearly not great, then your child sometimes cooperates, sometimes not. Maybe it takes a lot of nudging, a lot of repeated instructions, some, cajoling for that to happen. I mean all this pretty literally. Like if it's clear to you that you're in one of those categories, then you probably are, right? And this means that it's a good idea to think about how can you shift the balance of deposits to withdrawals. And there are separate sessions that we do here in the parent venture, specifically about that, right? Encouraging, creating more cooperation, basically about increasing goodwill in the relationship. But again, this is just to set a quick context. By the way, as a parent, obviously you have a lot of power over your child, whether or not your child is okay with that and whether or not your child acknowledges that. Of course, you have a lot of power over your child. And so you can coerce your child to do different things like inconvenience himself or herself, and essentially withdraw even more than exists in the account, right? Essentially go into overdraft by using your power. And that's a bad situation. And you can recognize it because it's kind of the opposite of having a high account balance, right? That's when your kid is spontaneously scheming to make your life worse, right? It's looking for your buttons to push, like it's just being a saboteur. And that means there's a relationship, that could mean that there's a relationship problem, a relational balance problem. And that's an even stronger call to think hard about inputs and outputs. What are you depositing and what are you withdrawing from the relationship? Okay, so all this on the relational account balance, right? Sorry, and here, just a quick partial list of things you can do to make deposits really throughout the day in very simple ways, right? Taking time to thank your kids, like with eye contact, praising your kid sincerely, making requests or directions respectfully versus not, right? Turn it off as opposed to, can you please turn it off? Stuff like that. When they talk, saying back to them what they're saying so they know that you're heard and that you care, checking in about things that they told you about in the past and so on. Nonverbals. I think these are all things you know about already, right? But sometimes it's just good to refresh, because I think the most common trap, maybe in relationships in general, certainly in parenting, is kind of assuming telepathy on the part of the other person, right? They know how much we love them. They know how much we care, and they know that we do everything for their benefit. It's nice to also show it and say it when we can, right? And these are all ways of showing and demonstrating how much we care about the other person and the respect we have for them. Okay, I say all this in the context of having a good conversation with our kid, because part of what's necessary to have a good conversation with somebody else is for the somebody else to believe that we care and to believe that we're safe to talk with, even about more serious, deeper stuff, right? And all of these are correlates of having a lot of goodwill in the relationship. And so even though I'm going to focus here on kind of tactical things that you can do in a conversation with your child to encourage more of the conversation, underneath it really is the strength of the relationship. If you have a good relationship with your child will want to talk with you and share with you and be supported by you and get your opinion and all of that. And if the relationship has a lot of friction or if the relationship is very tense at times, or if there's a lack of trust or comfort, then your kid will be more reticent and more distant, right? So I'm starting here with this kind of foundation, or like the infrastructure, and the rest of the time now I'll talk the next few minutes, I'll talk about kind of the tactical things. But I actually think this is more important than the tactical things. I want to say this very clearly, but also in order to be true to the topic, to not have what do you call it, false advertising, in order to not commit a sin of false advertising, I will talk about the tactical. Okay, but the relationship is all. Everything is better, everything is easier when the relationship is better. All right, tactical. I'm just going to give a list, and then I'm going to talk about each of these items a little bit. I'm sure you're all excellent readers, and so I'm not going to read this verbatim. But the idea is to ask. If you want your kid to talk, asking is a good idea, but ask about things your kid cares about. When your kid gets going, shift your position completely to just listening. You don't need to interrogate. You certainly don't need to be giving opinions or advice when they get going. As much as possible, consult with your kid. That's true both in terms of the impact on the relationship, because it shows so much respect when you are asking for someone's opinion and then actually taking it into consideration. So it's a great way to strengthen the relationship in general. And it's a great way to get people to talk, because people love to give advice, as you may know. And so I love to give advice. And so asking your kid for advice is a great way to get them talking and feeling like their voice matters, and therefore enjoy talking with you. And then as a general orientation, right, looking to be curious and learn from them rather than change them. And I'll get back to this at the very end, not nagging. If they don't want to talk, leave it. You know, don't intrude when they're saying clearly no. There are a couple of ways kind of around it. You can knock on the door, but kicking it down is not a great way to build a good conversation. Okay, open-ended questions. So here are some things you could just ask yourselves, right? Can you complete these easily? If not, maybe these are things that you want to learn, right? Who are your kids' friends? How does your kid like to feel? Meaning, what are some adjectives that your kid really wants to have attached to his or her name? Right? What makes your kid feel proud of being him or herself? Right? What are the kinds of things that feel good for your kid to feel or think about? What does your kid enjoy or is interested in? Right? What gets your kid kind of fired up and able to talk for a long time and kind of lose a sense of self in there? What does your kid really enjoy doing? What's a thing that your kid is really looking forward to that's about to happen? Or alternatively, what's a thing that's going to happen that your kid is worried about? Right? But what's like occupying your kid's mind? So if you can answer all of these things, great. If there are any of those that you can't answer, that's probably a good conversation topic, but also helpful for you to know. Once you know all of these things, you can start conversations from the middle, right? Because you already know that your kid is really worried about the upcoming tryouts for the orchestra, and you can check in about that. Or you know that your kid is really looking forward to trying this new recipe that he found on, the ChatGPT told him is a good idea. Okay, so in terms of open-ended questions. So open-ended questions, as I believe you know, I apologize if this is too obvious, but open-ended questions are questions that require essentially more than one word to answer. It really cannot be answered with one word, although your kids will find many creative ways to answer them with one word anyway. But you can at least raise the bar a little bit, but making it harder. So avoiding yes/no questions, avoiding questions that are tough to answer, like the best or the worst. That they're okay. There's nothing inherently wrong about them, but if it's already hard to get a conversation going, asking a question about like the most can really shut down people sometimes, right? Because they're like, well, is that the best? Let me think about 6 other things, and too much work, never mind, right? And so just asking about, instead of your favorite food, it can be like, what's food that you really enjoy, right? As opposed to like, what's your absolute favorite food? And you're like, well, is it a Monday, or did I just finish cycling? So avoiding these kinds of extremity questions, and then a lot of questions on what and how, and focus on feeling. How do you feel when, and how did you feel when? Because kids are people, and people like to talk about these kinds of things, right? So looking for open-ended questions that are easy to answer. How was school? Fine, right? And so can you get a little bit more specific than that? What did you learn specifically in this thing, a class that I know that you enjoy? Or, what crazy thing did Miss Jones do today in class, right? If you know that that's a thing, right? But being able to follow up and continue the conversation, but just being mindful of the question you ask and how you ask it. Did you see Julian today? Yeah. Right? If you know that there's something that they're already thinking about, it's ongoing, the more you can plug into it, the better. None of these questions are fatal flaws, right? If you say, how was school? And they go, fine, like no big deal, just ask another question. It's not like anything got lost at that point. Just recover gracefully and move on. Okay, so that's the point about open-ended questions as a tactical tool. In terms of listening, this is a really big one in my opinion. We all have the natural instinct, I don't know if all of us, but many of us have the natural instinct to opine when our conversation partner starts sharing. And all the more so when our conversation partner is a tiny person over whom we have authority. And being given advice when we're not interested in, being told that we're wrong about a way that we look at something, being encouraged to think about something differently than we are, and we're in the middle of processing it, it's just not great fun, and not a big encouragement to keep talking, right? And so if your goal is to encourage your kid to talk, at times your goal may be different, but if that is your goal, if your goal is to encourage your kid to keep talking, the more you can stay out of your kid's way, the better. Right? Your kid is leading. You're essentially putting your kid in the driver's seat of the conversation. And you're there for the ride, and you're not being one of those shotgun drivers or backseat drivers. You're letting your kid drive. And what this looks like practically is your kid talks, and then you paraphrase. You say it back. The WIG is an acronym for what I got. Right? You say back what you got from what your kid said. Blah, blah, blah. And then, the teacher told Harry that he had to leave because he was making funny noises, but we thought it was really funny. But then the teacher gave us all detention, which is crazy because we weren't doing anything wrong. And you may have a lot of opinions at this point of the story, right? But you're not telling your kid what to do or not to do, or what should have happened or what not. You're listening. And when your kid pauses for breath for long enough, you say, wow, she detained all of you? At which point your kid goes, yeah, for 20 minutes after, and just keeps talking, right? Good, your kid is talking. Later, you can give opinions, you can share whatever you want, but there's no easier way to get someone to talk than to pay attention and then say it back to make sure that you understood. And then they'll just keep going because we want to be known, and your kid wants to be understood by you. So this, in my mind, is actually probably the most important part of having a good conversation with your kid, right? Let them talk, and then they will. Consulting. I mentioned this a little bit before. So your kid has all kinds of opinions about all kinds of things and probably shares them with you liberally. But asking for them is a good move if you want your kid to want to talk to you more. If your kid feels like you care and appreciate his or her opinion, then they'll come to you with it, or at the very least, readily answer when you ask for it. And your kid doesn't have to be big to have opinions, obviously, right? When my kid was 3, I would talk to him about which restaurant. We go to a restaurant once a week with my sister, his aunt. And I asked him which restaurant he wants to go to. And he wanted to go to the Indian restaurant because they have a fish aquarium. They have a fish tank there. Like, it's a fair reason, I guess. He doesn't he still does not eat any. No, he just started eating a little bit of Indian food, but mostly it's the pasta from home. But still, they have opinions at any age. And obviously, the bigger they get, the more opinions they have. And the more you ask for their opinions and the more you care about their opinions, the more they will share their opinions next time when you invite them. Right. And the more they'll just disclose in the course of life. You're driving and you're saying, oh, shall we go visit this person today or do this thing? This person. Oh, great. Let's do that. What do you think we're going to do? Well, we could blah, blah, blah. How was last time? We'll go blah, blah, blah. And the conversation continues. Right. And as I mentioned, in general, to consult with someone to ask for their opinion is a great show of respect. And it's a relationship builder. Right. Just there's more goodwill in the relationship. And then all the good things that flow out of that: trust, cooperation, vulnerability, and so on. It's a very transferable kind of currency, goodwill. And consulting someone honestly is a great way to build goodwill. Okay. Right, that's what I said just now. Thank you, earlier me, for the slide to remind me. The general orientation of listening in order to learn from your child and about your child. My kid recently got into Star Wars and is teaching me all kinds of stuff about it. And I know all this stuff. I'm a nerd, but he insists that he knows it and he teaches me. And at some point I realized maybe that's okay for him to feel like he's teaching me all of these things. Bless you, Sandy. And that's kind of a, what to call it, like a shallow or peripheral example of something he's teaching me about, certainly about his life and how he feels about things and things that happen to him during the day. I want to learn, and I don't want to immediately one-up him, tell him what's the right way to think about things, tell him what's the right way to deal with a certain situation. If I have thoughts and opinions, which I often do, I'll wait until well after he's done talking, basically, right? Like I hear him, I learn from him, I understand. And then maybe before dinner, I'll say, hey, do you remember you told me about Kevin and this thing that happened today? I was thinking about that and I have some ideas. Do you want to hear? Right. But it's really disconnected from the time that I was listening to him, so that it doesn't turn out that whenever he talks, it ends up being my lecture. Right. I don't want that association in his mind. Okay. So listening in order to learn, not in order to tell or explain or indoctrinate or preach. And then the last point, which is maybe a little painful, sometimes we want to talk with our kids and they just don't want to. It's not a good time, this isn't a good year to talk with them, whatever it is. And if that's the case, I strongly encourage you not to chase them around for two reasons. One, this dynamic where one person chases and one person demurs is a very self-perpetuating dynamic. Like, you're just going to keep chasing and they're going to keep being in that role of not wanting to talk. Even on a tactical level, that's just not helpful. Better to give the space. But also, I think there's an element of thinking back about this relational account balance and this idea of care and respect as ways to make deposits of goodwill, and lack of care and lack of respect as ways of making withdrawals. I think that if somebody sets a boundary and we just walk over it or immediately ask him to clear away the boundary, that's a sign of disrespect. We're not respecting the boundary that they set up, right? And so I think that hurts the relationship a little and makes them less interested and less open than to talking. It feels less safe, right? If I can't put a boundary when I'm near you, then I don't have control over my space or my psychological space, and that's a problem. So if your kid doesn't want to talk at a given time, I would say that's fine. You can always say, hey, if you feel like talking, I'll be there. And if it's been a while and you haven't spoken, then you can say, hey, do you want to schedule a time to go hang out and do something? That's okay too. And this may come up in the Q&A, and so I won't kind of belabor the point. If you want to talk about it more, we can all talk about it later. But my main point is, again, if they set a boundary, if they say not now, respect the boundary. You can still check about other times to do it, but respect the right now boundary so as not to create antagonism on the part of your kid. So all the things, asking open-ended questions about things that your kid cares about will probably get them going. Once they're going, listen and don't interfere. Paraphrasing is a great way to show them that you're listening and to keep them going. In general, consult with them about things that involve them, that involve the family, and really take their opinion into consideration, whether or not it's based on something valid. At the very least, discuss it and ideally accept it as much as you can, so that they feel some agency, like they have a say in the family and are interested in using their voice, right? You give them a voice and they can use it. And then in general, listening to them in order to learn about them and about their world. Like they're a person that has a world and a life, and we don't know all about it. And when they're talking, we're not trying to change how they feel or how they see things or whatnot. We're just listening. We can do the changing later. But we don't want in their mind, every time that they talk to us, to turn into an opportunity for us to be giving speeches. And then accept their boundaries when they set them. And behind all this, just to loop it all the way back to the beginning, behind all this is just, in general, in the course of daily life, being mindful of the impact that our small behaviors have on the strength of our relationship, right? How can we make the relationship stronger? How can we make a relational deposits by showing care, by showing respect, so that the relationship is stronger, we feel closer, they want to talk more, right? Beyond the tactical, this is the foundation of the relationship, which I believe, again, makes everything easier. When you ask them to do something and the relationship is strong, they're more likely to do it. When you make a mistake and they witness it, they're more likely to forgive you. When the relationship is strong, when they have a problem and they trust you, they're more likely to come to you. When the relationship is strong, everything becomes easier as a relationship gets stronger.